Commander Jake Martinez was drinking his morning coffee when the alarm bells started ringing. The sound echoed through the bridge of the UES Titan, the biggest and strongest ship in the human fleet. Jake set down his cup and walked quickly to the main control station. "What do we have, Brooks?" Jake asked his communications officer. Lieutenant Sam Brooks looked up from her console with worried eyes. "Sir, we're getting a distress signal from the Kepler 442 system. It's coming in on emergency frequencies." Jake felt his stomach tighten. The Kepler 442 system was home to the Zephyrians, the first alien race that humans had ever met. They were peaceful creatures who looked like tall, thin people with blue skin and large eyes. 3 years ago, they had made contact with Earth and shared their amazing medical technology. In return, humans had taught them how to grow better crops. "Put it through the speakers," Jake ordered. The bridge filled with static and broken words. The voice was high and musical, the way all Zephyrians spoke. But this voice was full of fear. "Help us, ships in our sky. They are destroying our homes. We have no weapons. Please, anyone who can hear this ... dying." The message, repeated several times, then went silent. Jake stared at the speaker, his hands clenched into fists. The Zephyrians had never hurt anyone. They were like gentle children who had never seen violence before. "Brooks, send a message to Earth Command immediately. Tell them we need Admiral Chang on the line right now." Within minutes, the holographic image of Admiral Lisa Chang appeared on the bridge. She was a small woman with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Jake had served under her for 10 years and knew she was the best military leader humanity had ever produced. "Admiral, we have a situation," Jake began and quickly explained about the distress call. Admiral Chang listened without interrupting. When Jake finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "How long ago did the message come in?" she asked. 17 minutes ago, ma'am. We haven't heard anything since." "Jake, I want you to put your ship on high alert. I'm calling an emergency meeting of the Defense Council. We may be going to war." The connection ended, and Jake turned to his crew. "You heard the Admiral? Battle stations, everyone? This is not a drill." The bridge erupted into activity. Officers ran to their positions while computer screens lit up with tactical information. Jake had commanded the Titan for 3 years, and his crew was the best in the fleet. They moved like a well-oiled machine. 2 hours later, Jake found himself in a video conference with the most important people in the human military. Admiral Chung sat at the head of the table, surrounded by generals, admirals, and intelligence. "Officers, ladies and gentlemen," Admiral Chung began, "we face our first real test as a spacefaring species. The Zephyrians are under attack by unknown forces. Intelligence Officer Williams will brief you on what we know." Kate Williams stood up and activated a holographic display. It showed the Zephyrian star system with several red dots moving around. Long-range sensors show at least 12 large vessels in Zephyrian space. Their energy signatures don't match anything in our databases. They're not Zephyrian ships, and they're not from any other species we've encountered. Captain Ryan Murphy, commander of the assault carrier UES Valkyrie, leaned forward. "What about the Zephyrians themselves? Any word from their government?" Williams shook her head. "All communication from their planet stopped 3 hours ago. We have to assume the worst." Jake felt anger building in his chest. The Zephyrians had been nothing but kind to humanity. They had shared their knowledge freely and asked for nothing in return except friendship. Now someone was attacking them, and they had no way to defend themselves. "What are our options?" asked General Robert Stone, head of the Marine Corps. Admiral Chang stood up and walked to the display. "We have 2 choices. We can send a diplomatic message to these attackers and try to negotiate. Or we can send a fleet to fight them." "With respect, Admiral," Captain Murphy said, "what's there to negotiate? They're attacking innocent people who can't fight back. That makes them bullies, and the only thing bullies understand is force." Several other officers nodded in agreement. Jake found himself thinking about the Zephyrian delegation that had visited Earth the year before. They had been amazed by human cities, but also frightened by the museums that showed humanity's history of war. One of them, a scientist named Veltran, had called humans Deathworlders because they came from a planet where everything was dangerous. "Admiral," Jake said, "the Zephyrians have been our friends since first contact. They've saved thousands of human lives with their medical technology. We owe them our protection." "I agree," said Admiral Chang. "But we need to be realistic about what we're facing. These unknown ships are large and powerful. We could be walking into a trap." Intelligence. Officer Williams brought up another display. "According to our analysis, the attacking vessels are each roughly twice the size of our biggest ships. Their weapon signatures suggest energy-based systems far more advanced than ours." The room fell silent. Everyone knew what that meant. In a straight fight, the human fleet would be outgunned and outnumbered. "However," Williams continued, "there's something interesting about their movement patterns. They're very predictable. They seem to be following standard formation tactics, like they've never faced serious opposition before." Jake studied the display, his mind racing. Humanity had spent thousands of years fighting wars against itself. Every tactic, every strategy, every dirty trick had been tried and tested in countless battles. These aliens might have better technology, but they probably had never faced an enemy as experienced in warfare as humans. "What's the status of our fleet?" Admiral Chang asked. "The Titan is ready to go," Jake reported. "We can be underway in 6 hours. The Valkyrie needs 12 hours for full combat readiness," Captain Murphy added. Other commanders gave similar reports. Within a day, humanity could field its largest space fleet ever assembled. 12 heavy cruisers, 8 destroyers, 4 carriers, and the massive dreadnought Titan, 30,000 of Earth's finest soldiers and spacers, all equipped with the best weapons and armor human technology could provide. "There's one more thing to consider," said Dr. Helen Parker, the fleet's chief medical officer. "The Zephyrians have never experienced violence before. Even if we save them, they're going to need a lot of help dealing with what they've been through." "Admiral?" Chang nodded. "We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Right now, our priority is stopping these attackers and saving as many Zephyrians as we can." She looked around the table, making eye contact with each officer. "I won't lie to you. This is going to be dangerous. We're going up against an unknown enemy with superior technology. Some of us might not come back." Jake felt the weight of her words. He thought about his wife Sarah back on Earth and their 2 young children. But he also thought about the Zephyrians with their gentle ways and their trust in humanity. "However," Admiral Chang continued, "we have something these aliens don't. We come from a world where only the strong survive. We've been fighting and adapting for our entire history. We know how to win when the odds are against us." She stood up straighter. "The Zephyrians called us Deathworlders, and they were right. We're going to show these attackers what that means. All ships will rendezvous at Jump Point Alpha in 18 hours. We're going to war." The meeting ended, and Jake felt a mixture of fear and excitement. Humanity was about to face its greatest challenge. But he had faith in his crew, his ship, and his species. They would not let their friends down. The Deathworlder fleet was moving out. The human fleet left Earth's solar system like a pack of angry wolves heading into the darkness. Commander Jake Martinez stood on the bridge of the UES Titan, watching the stars stretch into lines as they entered hyperspace. The journey to the Zephyrian system would take 3 weeks, and every minute of that time would be precious. "All ships are reporting successful jump to hyperspace," Lieutenant Sam Brooks announced from her station. "Fleet is maintaining formation." Jake nodded. 24 of humanity's finest warships were now racing through the void toward an unknown enemy. The largest military force Earth had ever sent into deep space was about to face its first real test. "Brooks, patch me through to the entire fleet," Jake ordered. The communications officer worked quickly, and soon Jake was connected to every ship in the battle group. Thousands of faces appeared on screens throughout the fleet, all looking to him for leadership. "People of the fleet," Jake began, his voice carrying across space to every vessel, "we are heading into the unknown. We don't know what we'll find when we reach Zephyrian space, but we know why we're going. Our friends are in danger, and we're the only ones who can help them. He paused, looking at the faces staring back at him. Young pilots, experienced Marines, engineers, doctors, and support staff. All of them had volunteered for this mission, knowing they might not return home. Use these 3 weeks well. Train hard, prepare your equipment, and get ready for anything. We're going to show the galaxy what humans are made of. The transmission ended, and Jake turned to his own crew. The next 3 weeks would transform his fleet from a collection of ships into a weapon of war down in the Marine section of the Titan. Colonel Tony Rodriguez was already putting his soldiers through their paces. The large training area echoed with the sounds of combat drills and shouted orders. Rodriguez had been fighting wars for 20 years, and he knew that preparation was the difference between victory and death. "Listen up, Marines," he bellowed to the assembled troops. "We're going to fight in space, on alien ships, and maybe on the surface of an alien world. That means zero-gravity combat, boarding actions, and urban warfare all rolled into one." "Private." Danny Wilson raised his hand. "Sir, what do we know about these aliens we're fighting?" "Nothing," Rodriguez replied honestly. "We don't know how big they are, how strong they are, or how they fight. That's why we're going to train for everything." The Colonel activated a holographic training program. Suddenly, the Marines found themselves in a simulated alien ship corridor, complete with strange lighting and weird architecture. Enemy targets popped up from behind cover, and the Marines responded with practiced precision. "Remember," Rodriguez called out as his troops moved through the simulation, "we're not just fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for people who can't fight for themselves. The Zephyrians are counting on us." Several decks above, Engineer Beth Parker was working on a different kind of preparation. She had gathered her best technicians in the main engineering workshop, and they were busy modifying the fleet's weapon systems. "The problem," Parker explained to her team, "is that we're designed to fight other humans. Our weapons are built to penetrate human armor and destroy human ships. But we have no idea what these aliens are using for protection." Chief Technician Mike Foster looked up from the weapon he was working on. "What's the plan, Chief?" Parker smiled grimly. "We're going to give our weapons more options. Plasma rounds for energy shields, kinetic penetrators for thick armor, and electromagnetic pulse rounds for their electronics. If one type doesn't work, we'll try another." The engineering team worked around the clock, modifying railguns, upgrading missile warheads, and installing new targeting systems. Every weapon in the fleet was being improved, adapted, and made more deadly. In the navigation section, Lieutenant Commander Lucas Chun was facing his own challenges. The Zephyrian system was at the edge of known space, and the star charts for that region were incomplete. He had to plan multiple approach routes, accounting for asteroid fields, solar radiation, and other hazards. "We need to be smart about this," Chun told his navigation team. "If we drop out of hyperspace in the wrong place, we could find ourselves in the middle of an asteroid field or too close to the system's star." Chun's assistant, Lieutenant Mary Johnson, pointed to the star chart. "What about here? We could come in from the outer system and use the gas giant's moons for cover." Chun studied the proposal. "That could work, but we need backup plans. If the enemy is watching for us, they might have the obvious approach routes covered." Meanwhile, communications specialist Amy Turner was trying to solve a different puzzle. She had been analyzing the Zephyrian distress signal, looking for clues about what had happened to their friends. "The signal was cut off suddenly," Turner explained to her team. "Not like they turned off the transmitter, but like something destroyed it. The background radiation suggests there was a large explosion near their main communications center. The implications were grim. If the Zephyrians' communications had been destroyed, it meant the attackers were being thorough. They weren't just conquering the system, they were silencing it." Turner continued working, trying to find any trace of Zephyrian signals that might still be broadcasting. If there were survivors hiding somewhere in the system, she wanted to find them. In the medical bay, Dr. Peter Grant was preparing for casualties. He had studied every piece of information available. about Zephyrian biology, trying to understand how to treat their injuries. But he was also preparing for wounded humans, and that was almost as challenging. "We've never fought a space battle like this before," Grant told his medical team. "We could be dealing with vacuum exposure, radiation poisoning, plasma burns, and injuries we can't even imagine yet." Nurse Kelly Adams was organizing medical supplies. "What about the Zephyrians, Doctor?" "Their biology is so different from ours," Grant nodded. "That's our biggest challenge. They have blue blood instead of red. Their organs are arranged differently, and they react to many human medicines. We'll have to learn as we go." The medical team worked tirelessly, preparing surgical equipment, organizing medications, and setting up emergency treatment areas throughout the ship. They knew that in battle, every second would count. Captain Ryan Murphy aboard the UES Valkyrie was dealing with his own preparations. As commander of the fleet's main carrier, he was responsible for the fighter squadrons that would be crucial in the coming battle. "We're going to be outnumbered and outgunned," Murphy told his pilots in the briefing room. "But we have something these aliens don't. We're fast, we're smart, and we don't give up." The pilots listened intently. These were the best fighter pilots humanity had ever produced. Men and women who had trained their entire lives for this moment. Squadron leader Alex Johnson stood up. "Sir, what's our primary mission? Are we going after their big ships or protecting our own?" Murphy considered the question. "Both. We'll need to be flexible. Hit their ships when we can, protect our fleet when we must. The key is to stay alive long enough to make a difference." As the days passed, the fleet transformed. Weapons were upgraded, tactics were refined, and everyone became more skilled at their job. The ships that had left Earth were good, but the ships approaching the Zephyrian system were becoming something special. Jake Martinez walked through his ship during the night shift, checking on his crew. In the training areas, Marines were still practicing combat drills. In engineering, technicians were still modifying weapons. In the medical bay, doctors were still studying alien biology. "Can't sleep either?" came a voice from behind him. Jake turned to see Admiral Chang, who had joined the fleet on the Titan for the mission. She looked tired but determined. "Too much to think about," Jake admitted. "We're about to face something completely unknown. I keep wondering if we're ready." Admiral Chang looked out at the stars streaming past the window. "Jake, humanity has been preparing for this moment for our entire history. Every war we've fought, every battle we've won or lost, has taught us something. We're as ready as we'll ever be." She turned to face him. "The Zephyrians called us Deathworlders because we come from a dangerous planet. But that danger made us strong. It made us adaptable. It made us survivors." Jake nodded, feeling some of his worry fade away. "3 more days until we reach the system." "3 more days," Admiral Chang agreed. "Then we'll show the galaxy what humans can do when they're protecting their friends." The fleet continued its journey through hyperspace, racing toward an uncertain future. But with each passing hour, they became more ready for whatever awaited them in the darkness. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Zephyrian system, and Commander Jake Martinez felt his heart sink at what he saw. The beautiful blue world that had welcomed humanity 3 years ago was now surrounded by massive alien ships. Smoke rose from the planet's surface, and debris floated in space where Zephyrian orbital stations used to be. "Dear God," whispered Lieutenant Sam Brooks from her communications station. "What did they do to them?" Jake stared at the tactical display, counting the enemy vessels. 12 enormous ships, each one at least twice the size of the Titan, moved in slow patterns around the planet. They had strange, angular designs that looked like someone had built them from black metal and sharp edges. "Admiral Chang to the bridge," Jake called over the intercom. Admiral Chang arrived within minutes, her face grim as she studied the display. "What's our tactical situation?" Lieutenant Commander Nick Adams, the fleet's tactical officer, highlighted the enemy ships on the screen. "The unknown vessels are positioned in a defensive formation around the planet. They're not moving fast, but they're big." "Really big?" Jake watched the enemy ships through the main viewer. They looked like floating cities, covered in weapon ports. And armor plating? Any signs of Zephyrian ships? Negative, Adams replied. All the orbital stations are gone. The planet's communication networks are silent. I'm detecting some escape pods in the outer system, but they're not moving. Admiral. Chang turned to the communications officer. Brooks, try to contact those escape pods. If there are survivors, we need to know what we're dealing with. Brooks worked at her station for several minutes before shaking her head. I'm getting weak life signs from 3 pods, but they're not responding to our signals. They might be unconscious or too frightened to answer. Jake felt anger building in his chest. The Zephyrians were peaceful people who had never hurt anyone. They had shared their medical knowledge with humanity and asked for nothing in return except friendship. Now their world was burning. Admiral, said Captain Ryan Murphy's voice over the communication system, this is Murphy on the Valkyrie. My pilots are ready to launch, but we need to know what we're up against. Admiral Chang activated the fleet-wide communication system. All ships, this is Admiral Chang. We're looking at 12 large enemy vessels of unknown design. They appear to be harvesting resources from the planet and have destroyed all Zephyrian orbital facilities. She paused, letting the information sink in. Intelligence suggests these are ships from the Corvani hegemony, a military empire that has been conquering star systems for over 1,000 years. They've never faced serious resistance before. Jake had heard rumors about the Corvani. They were supposed to be an ancient race that conquered worlds through superior technology and overwhelming force. No one had ever successfully fought them, and lived to tell about it. Sir, Adams said quietly, I'm detecting movement from the enemy fleet. 3 of their ships are turning toward us. On the main screen, Jake could see the massive alien vessels changing course. They moved slowly but with purpose, like giant predators that had just noticed new prey. All ships, battle stations, Admiral, Chang ordered, prepare for combat. Alarms began ringing throughout the fleet. Jake watched his crew spring into action, their 3 weeks of preparation paying off. Every person knew their job, and they moved with the precision of a well-trained team. Enemy ships are accelerating, Adams reported. They'll be in weapons range in 20 minutes. Jake studied the tactical display, looking for any advantage. The enemy ships were bigger and probably more powerful, but they were also slower. Brooks, launch a reconnaissance probe. I want to know everything about those ships. The probe shot out from the Titan, its sensors recording everything about the approaching enemy vessels. Within minutes, data began flowing back to the fleet. Interesting, Adams said, studying the readings. Their shields are powerful, but they're designed to stop energy weapons. Their armor is thick, but it's not reinforced against kinetic impacts. Engineer Beth Parker's voice came over the intercom from the engineering section. Sir, we've been modifying our railguns for the past 3 weeks. We can fire solid metal slugs at nearly the speed of light. Their shields won't stop those. Jake smiled grimly. Humanity's oldest weapons were still the most effective. A chunk of metal moving fast enough could destroy almost anything. Admiral, came the voice of Colonel Tony Rodriguez from the Marine section. My people are ready for boarding actions if needed. We've been practicing for weeks. Admiral Chang nodded. Good, we're going to need every advantage we can get. The first enemy ship entered weapons range, and Jake got his first good look at the Corvani. The vessel was massive, covered in weapon ports and armor plating. Strange symbols were carved into its hull, probably marking it as a warship of their empire. They're scanning us, Brooks reported. Heavy sensors sweeps across the entire fleet. Jake could imagine the aliens trying to understand what they were facing. Humans were a new species to them, and human ships were probably unlike anything in their databases. Sir, Adams said urgently, the lead enemy ship is powering up its weapons. Energy buildup suggests plasma-based systems. All ships is evasive. Maneuvers, Admiral Chang ordered. Let's see what they've got. The Corvani ship fired and space lit up with brilliant energy beams. The weapons were incredibly powerful, but they moved in straight lines and were easy to avoid if you knew they were coming. Their weapons are strong but predictable, Adams observed. No guided projectiles, no area of effect systems. They're designed to destroy enemies that don't fight back. Jake understood. The Corvani had been conquering peaceful civilizations for centuries. They had never faced opponents who shot back, who used tactics, who refused to surrender. They were bullies who had never met anyone willing to stand up to them. All ships, attack formation Delta, Admiral Chang commanded. Let's show them how. Humans fight. The human fleet split into 3 groups, each one approaching the enemy from a different direction. The destroyers moved fastest, using their speed to get close to the massive Corvani ships. The cruisers provided covering fire, while the carriers launched their fighter squadrons. Captain Murphy's voice came over the communications system. Fighters away. Squadron leaders, remember your training. Stay fast, stay alive, and make every shot count. Jake watched the tactical display as dozens of human fighters swarmed toward the enemy ships. The small craft were too fast and agile for the Corvani weapons to track effectively. Direct hit on the lead enemy ship, Adams reported. Our railguns are penetrating their armor. The Corvani ship staggered under the impact, its shields flickering. Jake could see atmosphere venting from holes in its hull where the human projectiles had punched through. They're trying to adjust their formation, Adams continued. But they're too slow. Our ships are already inside their defensive perimeter. The battle was unlike anything Jake had ever seen. The human ships moved like a pack of wolves, attacking from multiple directions and never staying in one place long. Enough for the enemy to target them effectively. The Corvani ships were powerful but clumsy, designed for overwhelming weaker opponents rather than fighting a real battle. Sir, Brooks called out, I'm receiving a transmission from the enemy fleet. They're trying to communicate with us. Put it through, Admiral Chang ordered, the bridge filled with a deep, rumbling voice speaking in a language none of them recognized. But the translation software had been working on the alien speech patterns, and words began appearing on the screen. Unknown vessels, you will surrender immediately. We are the Corvani hegemony. We have conquered 1,000 worlds. You cannot resist us, Admiral Chang stepped forward. Tell them this, she said. We are humanity, we protect our friends, and we don't surrender to bullies. The transmission ended, and Jake could feel the tension on the bridge. The Corvani had probably never heard anyone talk to them like that before. Enemy ships are changing formation, Adams reported. They're trying to surround us, Jake smiled. Let them try. We've got a few surprises left. The real battle was about to begin. The battle exploded across the Zephyrian system like a deadly fireworks show. Commander Jake Martinez gripped the arms of his command chair as the UES Titan shook under enemy fire. The massive Corvani ships were trying to surround the human fleet, but Admiral Chang had other plans. All ships execute pattern chaos. Admiral Chang commanded over the fleet communications. Jake watched as the human fleet suddenly scattered in all directions. Instead of fighting like a traditional naval battle, the ships began moving in completely random patterns. Some ships dove toward the planet, others climbed above the system plane, and a few disappeared into the asteroid belt. Sir, the enemy is having trouble targeting us, reported Lieutenant Commander Nick Adams from his tactical station. Their weapons are designed for predictable targets. On the main screen, Jake could see the Corvani ships trying to track the human vessels. Their massive plasma cannons moved slowly, always arriving at spots where human ships had been seconds before. The aliens had clearly never faced enemies who refused to fight in neat formations. Brooks, patch me through to Captain Murphy. Jake ordered. Captain Ryan Murphy's face appeared on the screen, the bridge of the Yuz Valkyrie shaking behind him. Martinez, we're launching everything we've got. My pilots are ready to show these aliens what human fighters can do. Jake watched the tactical display as swarms of human fighters poured out of the carriers. The small craft moved like angry wasps, too fast for the Corvani weapons to track. Squadron leader Alex Johnson led the first attack wave directly at the nearest enemy ship. This is Johnson, came the pilot's voice over the communications system. Beginning attack run on target 1. These alien ships are huge, but they're slow as molasses. The fighters dove toward the Corvani vessel, their weapons blazing. The enemy ship's shields flared under the impact. But the small human weapons weren't powerful enough to penetrate the massive defenses. "Johnson, try the engine sections," suggested Adams. "Their rear shields might be weaker." The fighter squadron looped around the enemy ship, dodging the massive plasma beams that tried to swat them like flies. When they reached the rear of the vessel, their weapons found weak spots in the armor. "Direct hits on their engine housing," Johnson reported. "They're venting atmosphere and some kind of coolant." Jake felt a surge of hope. The enemy ships were powerful, but they weren't invincible. Every hit the humans landed taught them something new about Corvani weaknesses. "Sir," Adams called out, "the destroyer HFY Hawk is making an attack run on the enemy flagship." Jake looked at the tactical display and saw the small destroyer racing directly at the largest Corvani ship. Captain Rose Thompson was known for her aggressive tactics, but this looked like suicide. "Thompson, what are you doing?" Admiral Chang's voice crackled over the communications. "Testing a theory, Admiral," came Thompson's reply. "These aliens have never faced opponents who get in close. I'm betting their weapons can't target us at point-blank range." The Hawk accelerated to maximum speed, diving straight at the enemy flagship. The massive Corvani vessel tried to track the small ship, but its weapons were too slow and cumbersome for close combat. "She's right," Adams said with amazement. "The enemy weapons can't depress low enough to hit her. She's in their blind spot." The Hawk fired its railguns directly into the enemy ship's hull at almost touching distance. The kinetic projectiles, moving at incredible speed, punched through the alien armor like paper. Atmosphere and debris poured out of the holes. "All ships, close assault tactics," Admiral Chang ordered. "Get inside their weapons range and stay there." The human fleet suddenly changed tactics again. Instead of staying at long range, every ship began racing toward the enemy vessels. The Corvani found themselves facing opponents who were willing to fight at knife-fighting range. Meanwhile, Colonel Tony Rodriguez was preparing his own surprise for the enemy. The Marine Colonel had been watching the battle from the Titan's launch bay, where his assault shuttles were loaded and ready. "Admiral," Rodriguez called over the intercom, "request permission to launch boarding parties." "Boarding parties?" Admiral Chang's voice showed surprise. "Tony, those ships are massive. We don't know what's inside them." "That's exactly why we need to find out," Rodriguez replied. "If we can capture one of their ships, we can learn their weaknesses." Admiral Chang was quiet for a moment. "Do it, but be careful. We have no idea what Corvani soldiers are like." Rodriguez smiled grimly. "Only one way to find out." The Marine Colonel gathered his best soldiers in the launch bay. These were veterans who had trained for boarding actions their entire careers. They wore heavy armor and carried the most powerful weapons humanity had ever built. "Listen up, Marines," Rodriguez called out. "We're about to become the first humans to board an alien warship. We don't know what we'll find inside, but we know why we're doing it. The Zephyrians are counting on us." The boarding shuttles launched from the Titan, racing toward the nearest damaged Corvani vessel. The small craft were designed to punch through enemy hulls and deliver troops directly into hostile ships. "Breaching charges ready," reported Sergeant Carl Davis from the lead shuttle. "We're going to make our own door." The shuttle slammed into the alien ship's hull, their cutting beams carving through the metal. Within seconds, the Marines were pouring into the enemy vessel. Rodriguez stepped into the alien ship and looked around in amazement. The corridors were huge, designed for beings much larger than humans. The walls were covered in strange symbols, and the air smelled of ozone and something else he couldn't identify. "Stay alert," he warned his troops. "We don't know what we're walking into." The Marines moved through the ship in standard formation, their weapons ready. The corridors were eerily quiet, with only the sound of their own breathing and the distant hum of alien machinery. "Sir," whispered Private Danny Wilson, "I'm hearing something up ahead. Sounds like footsteps, but really heavy ones." Rodriguez held up his hand for silence. The sound was getting closer, like someone walking in metal boots that weighed 100 pounds each. around the corner came their first look at a Corvani soldier. The alien was enormous, almost 9 feet tall and covered in thick armor that looked like it was made from black metal. Its face was hidden behind a helmet with glowing red eyes. "Contact!" Rodriguez shouted. The Corvani soldier raised a weapon that looked like a cannon and fired. The energy blast hit the wall next to Rodriguez, melting the metal like butter. But the alien moved slowly, and the Marines were already diving for cover. "Flank him," Rodriguez ordered. The Marines spread out, using their superior speed and training to get behind the alien soldier. The Corvani was powerful, but it was also slow and clumsy. It had probably never faced enemies who could think and move as fast as humans. Sergeant Davis fired his plasma rifle at the alien's back. The shot penetrated the armor, and the massive soldier crashed to the floor. "One down," Davis reported. "But there are probably more of them." Rodriguez looked at the fallen alien. Even in death, it was impressive. These beings were built for war, but they were used to fighting opponents who couldn't fight back. "Keep moving," he ordered. "Let's find their command center." Back in space, the battle was reaching a turning point. The human fleet had damaged several Corvani ships, and the enemy formation was starting to break apart. But the aliens were finally beginning to adapt to human tactics. "Sir," Adams reported, "the enemy is trying to coordinate their fire." "They're learning from our attacks," Jake nodded. "The Corvani might be slow to adapt, but they weren't stupid. Given enough time, they would figure out how to counter human tactics." "Admiral," he called out, "we need to end this quickly. The longer the battle goes on, the more they'll learn about us." Admiral Chang understood. "All ships, prepare for final assault. We're going to hit them with everything we've got." The human fleet regrouped for one last attack. Every ship, every fighter, every weapon was aimed at the enemy vessels. It was time to show the Corvani what human determination really meant. "For the Zephyrians," Admiral Chung said quietly. "For the Zephyrians." Jake repeated. The final assault began. The final assault began with Commander Jake Martinez making a decision that would either save the day or destroy them all. The UES Titan, humanity's most powerful ship, turned directly toward the massive Corvani flagship and began accelerating to maximum speed. "Jake, what are you doing?" Admiral Chung asked from beside him on the bridge. "Something they won't expect," Jake replied grimly. "We're going to ram them." The bridge crew stared at him in shock. The Corvani flagship was 10 times the size of the Titan and covered in enough weapons to destroy a small fleet. Flying directly at it seemed like suicide. "Sir," Lieutenant Commander Nick Adams said carefully, "our shields won't protect us from that much firepower." Jake watched the tactical display as the enemy ship grew larger on the screen. "They won't expect us to do something this crazy?" "By the time they realize what we're doing, it'll be too late for them to stop us." The Titan shook as enemy plasma beams began hitting their shields. The massive Corvani flagship was pouring everything it had into trying to stop the human dreadnought. But Jake had counted on their shock at facing someone willing to die for victory. "All power to forward shields," Jake ordered. "Engineering, give me everything the engines can handle." Engineer Beth Parker's voice came over the intercom. "Sir, we're already past maximum safe speed. The engines might not survive this." "They don't need to survive," Jake said. "They just need to get us there." Admiral Chung activated the fleet communications. "All ships, focus fire on the flagship's weapons. Clear a path for the Titan." The entire human fleet turned their guns on the enemy flagship. Railgun slugs, plasma bolts, and missile warheads hammered the massive ship's defenses. The Corvani vessel's shields flickered and sparked under the concentrated assault dot in space around the flagship. Captain Ryan Murphy's fighters were doing their part. Squadron leader Alex Johnson led his pilots in desperate attacks on the enemy weapon ports, trying to silence the guns that were tearing apart the Titan's shields. "This is Johnson," came the pilot's voice over the communications. "We're taking heavy fire, but we're hitting their main batteries. Keep coming, Titan." Jake gripped his command chair as the ship bucked and rolled under enemy fire. The forward shields were down to 30% and falling fast. Sparks flew from control panels as the ship's systems overloaded. 10 seconds to impact, Adams reported. Jake looked around at his crew. These people had followed him into the heart of hell, trusting his judgment even when it seemed insane. He was proud to serve with them. All hands, brace for impact, he announced over the ship's intercom. The Titan slammed into the Corvani flagship like a bullet hitting a wall. The impact was tremendous, throwing everyone on both ships to the deck. Jake felt the Titan's hull groan and buckle under the stress, but the ship held together. More importantly, the impact had crippled the enemy flagship. The Titan's reinforced bow had punched deep into the alien vessel's hull, tearing through armor plating and destroying internal systems. Atmosphere and debris poured out of the massive wound. "We're locked together," Adams reported, picking himself up from the floor. "The Titan's bow is embedded in their hull." Jake smiled through his pain. His ship was badly damaged, but it had accomplished its mission. The enemy flagship was crippled and helpless. "All ships, concentrate fire on the remaining enemy vessels," Admiral Chang ordered. "Finish them off." Meanwhile, deep inside the Corvani flagship, Colonel Tony Rodriguez and his Marines were fighting their way toward the alien ship's command center. The boarding action had turned into a running battle through the ship's corridors. "There!" shouted Sergeant Carl Davis, pointing down a wide hallway. "That has to be their bridge." The Marines could see a large chamber filled with alien control stations and massive screens showing the battle outside. Corvani officers, each one nearly 9 feet tall and wearing elaborate armor, were trying to coordinate their ship's defenses. "Remember," Rodriguez called to his troops, "we want prisoners if possible. We need to learn about their empire." The Marines burst into the alien command center, their weapons ready. The Corvani officers turned in surprise, clearly not expecting human soldiers to appear on their bridge. The alien commander, distinguished by golden markings on his black armor, raised his hands in what might have been surrender. He spoke in the deep, rumbling Corvani language. "Translation coming through," reported Private Danny Wilson, who carried the portable translation device. "He says he is War Leader Thekmore of the Corvani hegemony. He wants to know what we are." Rodriguez stepped forward, his rifle pointed at the alien commander. "Tell him we're humans. Tell him we protect our friends." The translation device worked both ways, converting Rodriguez's words into the alien language. The Corvani commander's glowing red eyes widened behind his helmet. "He's saying something about Deathworlders," Wilson reported. "He's heard of us. The word is spreading through their empire." Rodriguez felt a grim satisfaction. Good. Let the entire galaxy know that humans protected their allies. Back in space, the battle was turning decisively in humanity's favor. The remaining Corvani ships, seeing their flagship crippled and their formation broken, were beginning to retreat. But Admiral Chang wasn't about to let them escape. "All ships pursue course," she ordered. "Don't let any of them get away." The human destroyers, fastest ships in the fleet, raced after the fleeing aliens. The Corvani vessels were powerful, but slow, and they couldn't outrun the smaller human ships. One by one, the enemy ships were surrounded and forced to surrender. The few that tried to fight were quickly overwhelmed by coordinated attacks from multiple human vessels. Captain Rose Thompson, commanding the destroyer USS Hawk, cornered the last Corvani ship near the system's edge. "This is Captain Thompson of the human fleet," she broadcast. "Surrender now or be destroyed." The alien ship's response was to try one last desperate attack, but its weapons were damaged, and the Hawk easily avoided the clumsy plasma beams before delivering the final blow. Within hours, the battle was over. The Corvani fleet was destroyed or captured, and the Zephyrian system was free. Jake stood on the damaged bridge of the Titan, looking out at the liberated planet below. "Sir," Lieutenant Sam Brooks called from her station, "I'm receiving signals from the planet. The Zephyrians are coming out of hiding." Jake smiled. "Put them through." The main screen filled with the familiar blue face of a Zephyrian. It was Veltran, the scientist who had visited Earth the year before. His large eyes were filled with tears. "Commander Martinez," Veltran said in his musical voice, "we thought we were going to die. The Corvani came from nowhere and destroyed our orbital stations. We hid in underground shelters and waited for the end. You're safe now, Jake assured him. The Corvani are gone, Veltrin looked amazed. But how? The Corvani hegemony has conquered 1,000 worlds? No one has ever defeated them before. Jake thought about how to answer. We're Deathworlders, remember? We come from a dangerous world that made us strong, and we protect our friends. Over the next several days, the human fleet helped the Zephyrians begin rebuilding their civilization. Medical teams treated the wounded, engineers helped repair damaged facilities, and Marines provided security. Dr. Peter Grant worked tirelessly in the medical centers, treating both human and Zephyrian casualties. The gentle aliens had never experienced violence before, and many were suffering from trauma as much as physical injuries. They'll recover, Grant told Jake during one of his visits to the medical bay. Physically, anyway. The psychological wounds will take longer to heal. Jake nodded. War left scars that couldn't be seen, and the peaceful Zephyrians would need time to process what they had experienced. The captured Corvani prisoners provided valuable intelligence about their empire. War leader Thekmor, under interrogation, revealed that the hegemony controlled hundreds of star systems and had been expanding for over a millennium. But you have changed things, the alien commander told his human captors through the translation device. Word of your victory is already spreading. Other conquered worlds are beginning to hope. Some are even beginning to rebel. Admiral Chang smiled at this news. Good, it's time someone stood up to bullies. As the human fleet prepared to return to Earth, Jake received a message from the Zephyrian government. They wanted to create a formal alliance with humanity, and they were offering to share their most advanced technologies in exchange for protection. We have learned something important, Elder Catherine told Jake during their final meeting. Peace is precious, but it must sometimes be defended with strength. We are grateful that humans understand this. Jake looked out at the stars as the fleet began its journey home. Humanity had announced its presence to the galaxy in the most dramatic way possible. They had proven that even the mightiest empires could be challenged by those willing to fight for what was right. The Deathworlder fleet was heading home, but Jake knew this was just the beginning. Other alien races would be watching, some with hope and others with fear. Humanity's role in the galaxy was just getting started. The universe had learned an important lesson. When humans made friends, they protected them, and anyone who threatened. Those friends would face the fury of the death world called Earth.